We've spent several hours now talking about pressing, important, soul-crushing topics that are super difficult to face down and really hard to find 67 people from across the political aisle and communities to come to some conclusion or agreement on. I can speak for myself. As a college professor, I bring students in all the time. I have a very diverse classroom, and it's challenging to speak on issues like this when I look like I do, right? When I'm trying to talk about white privilege and structural racism and that kind of stuff, and the background that I come from and the privilege that I've enjoyed, it's hard for me to pull the scales from my own eyes to then be able to articulate to them and help them see a broader picture of what's happening. And I do the best that I can. And in my class, I teach an intercultural communication course, and we talk about, intercultural communication. And inherent in that are all the subcultural moments we have across our city and our state. And we talk about what is structural or institutional racism, and how does it work? And there's a great line that says, from a book by Dr. Kendi, that talks about it and says, the system isn't broken, it was made this way. And I challenge my students to talk about, what do I mean when I say it was made this way? I talk about, and this does, trust me, it does relate back to this amendment, so I hope you'll bear with me just for a second. But when I talk about how is it made this way, I ask them questions. Who invented the English language? Who invented our institutions of religion, our institutions of government, our institutions of education, as we understand them here in America? And the answer would be, white men did. No questions asked. They have been in charge and created all of it. Now, do I think that white men created that with the goal of holding people down and pushing people back and repressing others? I certainly hope not. I'm trying to be optimistic when I say that. But structural racism exists because we have moments, and it's worst like what happened to George Floyd, and it's most benign like we have in the story I'm about to tell you. And I may have told this story before, so please forgive me. My family has a good friend who's a rich lawyer who lives in the western suburbs, and he moved into this one very affluent suburban neighborhood, and at the same time he did, a very prominent African-American surgeon moved in the neighborhood at the same time. And our family friend and this, who's white, and this prominent black doctor became friends because they're new to the neighborhood, they'd have coffee, that kind of stuff. And one day, about 5 years later, after they moved in, they run into each other at the Byerly's, and they decide to have lunch, and it turns out they're both moving out of town. So they're going to talk about what their experience was and just kind of say goodbye. My dad's friend said, I love this area. I've not had problems with crime. I've never had problems with the police. I've never had problems with anything. It's quiet and it's wonderful. Never had to deal with anybody. It's just like I like it, in the suburbs, left alone. And the African-American doctor laughed and said, that's funny you should say that, because I am on a first-name basis with every member of the police force because I've been pulled over so many times in this town. Every single member, I know them all on a first-name basis. And let's be clear, my dad's friend, he's a crappy driver. He should have got pulled over, trust me, right? And so I point out that this idea of structural racism isn't this deal where, like, I jokingly say to my students that white people are getting this secret check on the side to help them get by on weekends. It has to do with the obstructions that they have to face every day. And for me, my skin color is not one of them, right? I can tell you times that I've been pulled over and let off in situations that I've heard the exact same thing occurring in Minneapolis or St. Paul, and that didn't happen for my friends of color. Listen, why I think you get such a struggle on these bills is because, as I said in the beginning, and not that you're going to listen to me, I'm a bit of a mouthy freshman. I have that reputation, I get it. But the reality is, I said at the very beginning of the first debate, my job here today, as a white person who doesn't know any better, is to listen. I need to listen more, because I can't prescribe what's better for the situation. I'm not walking in their shoes. I don't know what it's like. My friends, the Posse Caucus, have asked you guys to listen And based on the comments I've heard from several senators, I am confident that those senators haven't heard a word that's been said. I hear a little sympathy, but my friends in the Posse Caucus have been very clear in asking for, even just nibbling around the edges, as Senator Dibble said, on some of these bills. Most have been rejected, some procedurally rejected. Now, I get it. If it breaks the rules, it breaks the rules. I don't have a problem with that. I understand that's how it works. But the reality is the discussion hasn't gone that way. The discussion hasn't been with our friends. We have not sought for them to solve the problem. We have not asked them, how do we fix the problem? And I'm always marveled by that at the legislature. If I want to know how to fix our classrooms, I'm going to ask a teacher. If I want to know how to fix business, I ask my local businesses how to do it. Right? My friends who have been elected by 70 or 80,000 of their peers, who are probably more in touch with their district than anybody else we know. It's their job, it's their responsibility, it's what their life calling is, much like your life calling, have went into those districts, have talked to those folks, have tried to reassure those folks they're on the ground, they have the pulse, and they were not discussed, did not get a chance to discuss these things. These solutions don't reflect what they think is meaningful reform. Senator Johnson said that there has been a reckoning for the senator, or for the cop that put his knee on George Floyd's neck. Unfortunately, it's the 18th time he got in trouble. The first 17 times, the culture of that police force and what's going on did not call him into question. So imagine if we had changed the culture earlier, would he have been in a position to put his knee on George Floyd's neck? No. That's what they're asking for. I've not heard one person address that yet. Clear as day to me as I listen. Folks, it's disappointing. And it's hard and it's frustrating and it's tough to feel powerless because I don't know how to help other than be supportive. And that's what I'm going to do, right? I'm going to have to trust my friends no better than I do on this one. And I think they've got a good idea of what's happening. And I would encourage the rest of us to take some time to do that. What I don't like is the false indignation and the wild claims of like defund the police or we don't want police around here anymore. No one has said that here, not one person. In fact, the only people that have made those kind of comments have been my friends across the aisle. We have rejected those comments. I know those words are out there in the greater ethos, but you're not hearing it here. So don't bring that narrative to us and try to paste us with that. That's politics. The reality is we want meaningful reform. And our friends in the other body sat down for many hours to try to come up with some ideas on how we can solve this problem in a hurry. We didn't do that here. So I don't want us to equate meaningful reform on what the GOP and the Senate has said with meaningful reform what the House Democrats did. They're not the same. It's insulting to assume that would be even close. We have an opportunity here to make a real difference, but arbitrary timelines, bills that are Band-Aids are all that's being offered. And when a rebuttal has been given that allows us to have a discussion, to call it out, and let me tell you something, sir, Mr. President, Jeff Hayden has shown more humility and class listening to the crap he's had to hear today than I could. I have to be in a different room so I don't say something inappropriate. I know Senator Benson's got a rule book annotated for me, so I'm ready anytime, but the reality is that I would have not been nearly as classy or humble or gracious in my comments. But that's probably my privilege speaking right there. Senator Hayden's got work to get done. He can't waste his time with anger. I'll be angry. I'm insulted, and I am very angry about that, and I'm super disappointed. I expected way more from us, especially after what we just watched, way more. But I see the social media battle, and I see the campaign brewing, and I know people are facing primaries, and everybody's tense on both sides of the aisle. And it's unfortunate that that skews our lens as we try to take a clear look at how we can make a systemic change and finally put our foot down and say, no more of this. Can we wait till next January? Well, if no one dies, maybe it was okay. But who knows if that'll happen again. Every year, it seems like we have a new person that's been a victim of the police force. Now, does that mean that I agree, most aren't that bad. My friends that are policemen, I would trust implicitly. I get it, most of them are probably good apples. People are still dying, folks. That means the status quo doesn't work. And Dr. Kendi in his book about racism was very clear. It's not enough just to say you're not a racist. Either you are anti-racist or you're not. Because if you say you're not a racist, but you go back to the beginning of what I was talking about, you don't address unpacking structural racism as it exists in our society, then you are complicit in allowing it to continue. And in doing so, you are guilty, whether through action or omission. 100% true. If you don't take it upon yourself to say, every time I see someone who's suffering from injustice, and say his injustice and his problem is the burden I need to bear, you're not doing your job. It's a pretty Christian concept if you think about it. Jesus was pretty clear about it. So I'll tell you, I expect more from us, and if we can't get that done, then we'll have to move on to the next election, and maybe we'll see some changes, and then we'll be able to do it. But I'm super disappointed, and I hope we vote no on this bill. Thank you.